Okay, so it's 10 o'clock, so I think we'll probably be starting in a minute. Hello, Tammy from Shropshire. Okay. Oh yes, solidarity to the comrades at Oak Park school picket line this morning. Well done. Oh, good for the people making the cakes and the coffee. Okay, 10 o'clock and we're ready to start. So good morning, everyone. I'm really delighted to welcome you to today's webinar. This is the first session out of two, exploring how co-production can create system change for people experiencing multiple disadvantage. Thank you so much to our panelists. We've got Charlotte, Linda and Tony. So yeah, thank you for joining us today, and Winston for being my co-facilitator. My name's Katie and I'm the peer programme lead at Fulfilling Lives. I'm going to hand over to Winston shortly to explain a bit more about the programme. But first, there's just a little bit of housekeeping. So we are reaching you via Zoom webinar. This means your cameras and microphones are automatically turned off. However, please do use the chat function, as I can see some of you are already. That will help you to interact with us and with other participants in the room. And we know that others will have like a wealth of knowledge and experience to share. And today is about hearing from everyone, not just from us and the panelists. We'd love everyone to add their name and location into the chat box to say hi. So please do, if you haven't already, make sure you select panelists and attendees so we can all see what each other are saying. You can submit any questions that you might have to the presenters and panel via the Q&A icon, which should be at the bottom of your screen. Please do so. Please ask as many questions as you have, and we'll do our best to respond to as many as we can. And the panelists may be throwing some questions out to you guys as well. So I'm just reading from my script so I don't forget anything. We're recording the session and the recording will be available afterwards to ensure that any who couldn't make the event this morning can still access what we've shared. And if you're a Twitterer, please do tweet along. The Twitter handles of our panel and the hashtags we're using are on the screen and will pop up in the chat now. So you've got easy access to them. We'll share links to some of our reports in the chat, but please do share any links that you have for your organisations or any resources that you think others might benefit from. This is a learning space for all of us. We are also joined in the audience today by Johnny Glover, a colleague from More Than Minutes, who will be illustrating the discussion as we go to capture a visual representation of the conversation this morning. We'll be sharing the illustration once it's ready, and we can also share the slides after the event if that is useful. I think that's it. So over to my wonderful colleague, Winston, for a bit more about Fulfilling Lives.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome again. Fulfilling Lives Lambeth, Southwark and Lewisham is funded by the National Lottery Community Fund and is part of the National Fulfilling Lives programme focusing on multiple disadvantage. 12 local partnerships across England are funded to test new ways of ensuring individuals receive joined-up and person-led services which work for them. We are privileged to be one of these funded programmes. Our aim is to change the lives of people experiencing multiple disadvantage for the better, both now and in the future. Secondly, to give equal value to the voice of both the decision maker and the people we support, so that all opinions are heard and respected equally. Third, make an impact in the way individuals are supported by influencing policy and practice both locally and nationally, so that everyone can lead a fulfilling life. At Fulfilling Lives Lambeth, Southwark and Lewisham, our program has three main areas of work to help us achieve this aim. First one, service delivery. The program has delivered a specialist outreach service providing holistic support to people experiencing multiple disadvantage in Lambeth, Southwark and Lewisham. Co-production. We focus on co-production, working to give equal voice to people experiencing multiple disadvantage. And thirdly, system change. We provide learning and evidence that will be used to influence on a local and national level, creating sustainable, long-term systemic change for people facing multiple disadvantage. We acknowledge that the system doesn't work for everyone, particularly people who experience great levels of disadvantage. In order to improve the lives of people experiencing multiple disadvantage, we believe the system needs to change. This requires a shift in thinking, moving away from focusing on an individual as a problem to a focus on the system. If you're interested in finding out more about system change or system change priorities, then check out our website at fulfillinglives.london/system-change. Thank you. Over to you, Katie.
Lovely, thank you, Winston. So what is co-production? Co-production to me always feels like a kind of like a small act of rebellion. It challenges the status quo and it shakes things up. If it is done well and with integrity, it's a way to create real and meaningful change. The term co-production in its most simple terms describes working together as equals on a shared project or goal. Now, this might not sound particularly revolutionary, but in a system that doesn't always recognise the richest and the value of lived experience and true collaborative working, it really is. At Fulfilling Lives, we believe that some of the key principles that underpin co-production are having a clear and shared purpose, surfacing and exploring power dynamics, building trusting relationships, and valuing lived and learned experience equally. And I'm sure that you will have like loads more kind of principles and ideas to add to that list. So please feel free to share those in the chat. We don't have long, so I'm going to kind of like move on to appreciative inquiry, which is kind of what this workshop is based on, the model that this workshop is based on. So appreciative inquiry is a collaborative strength-based model designed to create change in services and systems. We found that the appreciative inquiry model worked really well as a model to support co-production when we trialled it recently in the programme. We used it to co-design with women who had experience of using services and service practitioners what a gender-informed access to drug and alcohol treatment could look like for women experiencing multiple disadvantage. We were introduced to the model by Linda, who is on the panel today, so thanks for that, Linda. The model encourages participants to follow the 4-step cycle shown here on the slide. The idea is that you build on the positives of what already exists, using it to drive and fuel your imagination to think about what's possible in the future and how you will put that into action. So part 1 focuses on discovery. That's really exploring the best of what is currently happening and what makes it that way. Part 2 is all about dreaming. And this is the no holds barred part of the model. What could be? What are your hopes and dreams? What's your vision for the future? All without limitations. Part 3 is about design. It's the learning from part 1 and the aspirations from part 2, combining to create a plan to realise the vision based on best practice. And the final part of the cycle focuses on delivery. Now that you've created something wonderful, what will you do to put your plan into action and make it sustainable? So in today's workshop, we'll be working through part 1 and part 2 of the cycle. And as I mentioned earlier, we have some resources that we can share afterwards for you to take away if you're interested in trying this approach yourself. So to start us off on part 1, we have 3 guest speakers who will be sharing their experience of being part of the best of what is. So firstly, we have Charlotte Manning. Charlotte is our programme ambassador and an integral part of the Fulfilling Lives team, where she's been influencing and guiding us from the beginning. She sits on our core strategic group and represents us at the National Expert Citizens Group, as well as contributing to multiple projects within the programme. She's just completed the first year of a law degree at Southwark University, passing with firsts, and is just about to start her second year. So well done, Charlotte. We also have Linda Bush. Linda is the founding member of Inspirit Training and Development, a user-led agency that is the drug and alcohol sector's best kept secret. Linda has been facilitating learning and development in the substance use field since 1994, and she's interested in power, how it can be used, held, developed, negotiated and shared. She's also a badass group facilitator, and by her own admission, a slightly scary good witch. You did say I could say it, so I hope that's all right. And finally, we have Tony McKenzie. Tony brings over 30 years of lived and learned experience working in the voluntary and public sectors, focusing on youth work, homelessness and community engagement. He currently works at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation as their Senior Participation Officer and is a trustee for People's Voice Media and Groundswell. Tony enjoys cycling, reading magic realism and dinner parties. So feel free to stick your invites in the chat as well. So I am going to hand over now to Charlotte to start us off. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Katie. I've been accessing services for nearly 20 years now, primarily substance misuse, but obviously also mental health services with dual diagnosis practitioners and counsellors. In the past, I've been asked to take part in service user groups where the services wanted feedback on what they were doing right or wrong. But my experience of that has always been that it just turned into a moan up with all of us, the service users, going on about what wasn't working and what we thought the service should be doing better, basically focusing on the negatives. Very rarely did anyone mention what they felt was working or what they liked. And in hindsight, I think that was because of the way these groups were run. We thought that that's what the service wanted to hear. So prior to the groups, I'd be thinking of all the things that made me angry or frustrated, like waiting times and rigid appointments. And I'd be in a really negative frame of mind before I even got there. And although I can't speak for others, I imagine that they felt the same. Now, this creates a space that was negative from the outset. It was a group where tensions were high. Everyone was emotional, there'd be raised voices, and the facilitator would have to manage all of that without being able to absorb anything that was said, let alone try and explain why parts of the service had to be run like that or why they couldn't do certain things that we wanted. And I'd leave these spaces more wound up than when I'd gone in, feeling like we hadn't achieved anything. And to be honest, nothing really significant would come from them anyway. I wouldn't really see any impact, the service wouldn't change, and I'd never hear anything from the staff. And these spaces became very much about us and them. So you'd have the representative from the service acting like a teacher and us feeling like school children. The power dynamics were all wrong. And I'd never feel like my opinion mattered because it didn't really feel listened to or acknowledged. I felt like it just kind of went over the staff's head, or they'd come across as if they'd heard it all before. And there was also that element of trust issues. I wondered if I went on too much about how the service wasn't meeting my needs, was I going to be met with frostiness when I came back, or was I coming across as ungrateful? And this really held me back from being truthful or exploring what the issues were that I was facing. And there's nothing constructive about group running this way. It just felt like a really defensive and toxic atmosphere. And obviously you're talking about a group of people here, usually in very early recovery. So we're all feeling quite raw and there's lots of feelings coming out sideways or misdirected. And people need to be supported in that kind of space to contribute meaningfully. So with Fulfilling Lives, however, service user involvement, or as we now call it, the voice of lived and learned experience, has been managed so differently. My most recent co-production experience with the programme was when I was asked to take part in the workshops and asked to share my experiences of accessing drug and alcohol services and explore what gender-informed women's access to drug and alcohol treatment was, which are the workshops that Kate was talking about earlier. And these were planned really well. The focus was completely shifted away from negative thinking. We did talk about what had worked for us, but it wasn't the main focus. And because these workshops were facilitated using the appreciative inquiry model, we entered into the space with a completely different mindset from the outset. The facilitators explained the stages of the model, and we were briefed before each workshop on the theme. So discover, dream big. So we had an understanding of what was expected from us from the start. And if at any time during the workshops, it felt like the conversation was becoming overly problem focused. And to be honest, we all knew what the problems were. Everyone in that room, you know, we didn't need an hour to go over and over them again. It wasn't new information. So we was encouraged to steer towards creating solutions instead of constantly focusing on the problem itself. So I'll give you a brief example. My local drug service has first through the door at 9 a.m. can get scripted on the day. And I have done this myself. I've had to go down there at 6 in the morning. I've not slept, you know, I've sat outside drinking, or I was quite lucky enough in that my shared care worker arranged to come and pick me up at my home at 8 to get me down there for 9. But, you know, we know that this doesn't work for a lot of people. So instead of us spending, you know, 10 minutes, half an hour talking about this over and over again, facilitators asked us what could help, you know, what is the solution? What times do we think that appointments should be available and why? And we were also encouraged, you know, to think about other women's needs, you know, women who were working 9-to-5 job or women with children. And in these workshops, I didn't feel that I was half-heartedly being asked for my opinion just to tick box. You know, you can tell when someone's authentically listening to you. And neither did I feel that anything that I or we put forward was an impossibility. And being heard like that is incredibly powerful, made me feel valued, that I had something to contribute and that I was potentially making a difference for women in the future. And another point is about the group itself, you know, as well as learning that I wasn't alone in my opinions, which is validating, you know, on what the service could be doing better. So we bounce ideas off everyone in the room. But the most important and so surprising thing for me was how valuable it was to sit in a room with paid staff who were able to give their side of things. And I was able to witness their frustrations as well. And that just broke down any barriers of us or them. And it really compounded that everyone in the group was on that equal level. Everyone was just as important as each other. There was no imbalance of power, because for once I could hear them sharing their experiences. So I wasn't just expected to talk, you know, and share mine. I was, you know, it was a two-way conversation. And I learned so much. It gave me insight and compassion for the people that work in services too, who do the absolute best they can, but do experience a lot of frustrations themselves. And through the workshops, you know, these conversations became very balanced. We explored solutions without limitations, blue sky thinking, but at the same time, expectations were managed. And when a group is run in such a way, there isn't space for us or them. And I felt like anyone could have walked into that room and they wouldn't have known, you know, who was who. So it made me realise that in service user groups of old, the staff members could be sitting there with as much to say, but not really given any chance to speak, because maybe they thought it was inappropriate or unprofessional to express their feelings, and being frustrated from the outset as well, because it was just a place for people to vent. And they probably knew that there wasn't really going to be any change that they wanted to see too. So for me, the process of being part of the group was just as important as the outcome. So for the first time in nearly 20 years, I heard from different perspectives. You know, I heard that staff get angry and frustrated and wish things were different too. And the group created that bond and trust that I hadn't experienced in a setting like this before. And I gained a greater understanding of kind of the logistics of things and how things work behind the scenes. So I can see how co-production and the appreciative inquiry model could also be used in different areas, you know, mental health service user groups, for example, because it's so much healthier to allow everyone to express themselves in that one safe space. And we need to understand each other and create that level playing field. and because it's a shared journey, so between us all. It really was a very positive experience, and it shows the difference between consultation and co-production. I came out of those workshops with positivity, increased self-esteem. I felt calm, and I felt like I've been part of something very special, something that had the power to create some really important changes. Thank you.
It was wonderful, Charlotte. Thank you so much. And we'll have a chance to kind of like talk about some of the things that you've said afterwards, but because our time is so limited, I'm going to hand over to Linda. Thanks again, Charlotte. That was great.
I'm next. Okay. I'm going to try and keep it really brief because I do realise that time is short. So I'm not going to go on about, I think, our organisation. We have been around since 2007, so we're managing to stay alive somehow. So we're doing something right, I think. But we have been sort of working. We didn't start off as an organisation focusing on co-production. It didn't really happen until about sort of 6 years after we started. But I think, because as an organisation, because we're all either ex-service users or ex-drug and alcohol users, we, I guess, as a lived experience organisation, I guess we kind of developed our own kind of way of doing things. So when it became clear that services were interested in our perspective, partly because we were a lived experience organisation, we started doing a lot of research around user involvement and co-production. And we found a couple of really useful models, and I mean, the appreciative inquiry was one of them. But what we also use is a model which was started off as a community development model by David Wilcox. I can send a link to that stuff actually to FLL so that you can get hold of that, I think. But David Wilcox's community development model is really lovely because it talks about process, and I think this is something that really tied in with all of our approach in our organisation, because we started off as a training organisation, and what we really recognised, training people to be drug and alcohol workers, was so much of it was about the way you do something rather than necessarily the content. It's like the way you do it really matters. And I really hear what you're saying, Charlotte, that experience of people kind of complaining and there being a bit of an us and them thing. I saw that working in drug treatment all the time. It was just really futile, I think, and just serve to continue the divisions. So we, the Wilcox model, I'm just going to talk about it very simply, but the first part of the model is about initiation. And you ask questions like, how do people become involved? Who knows about the opportunity to get involved? Because this is where you meet your kind of real need to be ensuring that there is an equalities element there. Is it just white men that get their voices heard? As I often heard actually in drug treatment, that's quite often, it was like the usual suspects were kind of like pulled in to give their opinion, but the broader group were not really considered. Women rarely got their voices heard actually. So, who gets to hear about the opportunity? But the next part is really important, and this is what I'm going to focus on now, is the preparation. It's all very well requesting that people who use your services get involved, but what do they need to do that and feel okay in it? How do they feel confident and competent in what they're doing, rather than just be kind of like wheeled into a meeting, be expected to say something sensible and then be wheeled off afterwards, as it were. And now we've ticked our box, as you mentioned, Charlotte. I'm sure that really sounds familiar. So, so preparation is really, really important. The next part is supporting people while they're involved, and the last part is reviewing it, both looking at the impact on us as an organisation or the organisation, but also the impact on the service user for taking part. What difference does it make to them? So that's a two-way review. So I'm going to talk very, very quickly about the preparation part, and I'm just going to give you a little example of something that I'm working in at the moment in Haringey. We've trained a group of ex-service users to be part of the strategic commissioning group, which now work alongside the commissioners in Haringey substance misuse services to decide what service specs should look like and to decide what questions should be in bids and all that sort of thing. And they're taking part in reviewing services and overseeing co-production in services across the borough. So that's really interesting. But they have now been given the opportunity to develop a service for service users that is service user led themselves, and we are supporting them to do that. So one of the things they needed to do was to recruit somebody to help coordinate. So rather than us kind of like just create or give them a pre-created role profile, we sat down and we spent time preparing them to create their own role profile. So we took a whole day and we talked about, okay, how do role profiles get created? Where do they come from? So we talked about the history of the needs assessment in a borough, and then thinking about, okay, so what services get delivered? And once you decide what service gets delivered, how does somebody make sure that that delivery is done well? And so then you kind of drill down into what the role profile actually looks like. So what we did is we looked at the service spec that they had created for the service, and then we had like a discussion, a really long discussion about what does that really look like if we're going to recruit somebody? What are they going to be doing on a day-to-day basis in order to meet the things that we want them to do? So that took about 3 days. And I think that's one of the things that I want to say about, it's really about, if you think about the hare and the tortoise, I know I'm talking really quickly here, but if you think about the hare and the tortoise, there's like, you know, the hare charges ahead because we want to tick the box, we want to get the thing done. Yeah, we want service user involvement. It's like, no, slow down. Because actually, people need to be enabled to do it well, and that takes time. So we took 3 days to sort of really thrash out what that looked like. And at the end, we came up with something that everybody was happy with. And we had a role profile that clearly identified everything that this person was going to need to do that they're going to recruit. And they also sat down and thought, right, so, you know, what are the qualities that we're going to be looking for in an interview? So then they took another day to really think about, you know, what should the person's specification look like? And they've done some previous peer research, which really identified things like service users saying, it's not so much what's delivered really, it's just that we want to feel accepted, we want to feel included, we don't want to feel stigmatized, you know, all this kind of stuff. So, so they created a role profile and a person specification. And then we took some more time to think, okay, so now you're going to be doing this interview and deciding who this person is. So now you need to think about what's going to happen in the interview. So what questions do you want to ask? And the way that we supported them to do that was we got them to think about what kind of answers would you like to hear somebody say? So then they sat and thought about, what do we want to hear in the right participant, you know, this person who's going to be recruited to run this project. And once they'd got that down, then they thought, right, okay, so now what are our questions in order to get those kind of things that we're listening for? So they created not only the role profile and the person specification, but the questions and the things that they're going to be listening for. And next week, they're going to be on a panel of 3 themselves, and they're going to be recruiting people and making their own decisions about who runs the service that they are delivering. So, I mean, for me, that feels like such an important and powerful thing to do. And, you know, it isn't just about them getting their voice heard. It's about them really taking responsibility to develop something for their community and actually taking ownership over it. And, you know, and they're not on their own. Our job is to support them in that, but not to tell them what to do, just to show them that they can do it and to give them the information they need so they can make those decisions for themselves. And you know, that process, I think, is something that you can kind of follow regardless of what your activity is, you know, thinking about the initiation, thinking about how you prepare people, thinking about how they're supported, and thinking about how they're properly involved in a review. And if you get all of that right, then hopefully you're going to have a pretty meaningful bit of co-production on your hands. I'll shut up there. Thanks, everybody.
That was amazing, Linda. Thank you so much. So exciting, such a different way of doing things. Just, yeah, fabulous. Again, time. So I'm sorry. So thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Tony.
First of all, I'm just so honoured to be here. So thank you so much, Kathy and team, for inviting me to be here. Charlotte and Linda, what have you left for me to say? I mean, seriously, come on. What is such a joy about doing this work is that there's people who get it and do it, and then there's other people, and I don't mean to cause any offense here, who are just asking for toolkits. Yeah, just some of the things that Charlotte was saying about, and this is really, really important, the process is as important as the outcome. Yeah. Also, when Linda was talking, she was saying it's the way that you do it. And people often ask, what is co-production? How do you do it? What do you need? First and foremost, you A, got to like people, and B, just be interested and willing to be less risk averse. Take the reins off, decide a piece of work with them, and all that stuff that Charlotte was talking about and Linda was talking about, how you get people to feel relaxed and to participate and not just to be used, is really, really important. Now I'm going to start my bit. Okay, I'm just going to share one slide with you. Can you all see this slide? Yeah, brilliant. So I often say this quote because on my journey, as somebody who's got lived and learned experience, there wasn't always access to some of these meetings. There wasn't always, you know, certain people were constantly being invited to talk or to get their opinions. And it was like, how do we change that? And there's a woman called Shirley Chisholm, who was the first Black woman to run for Congress in America. And she said, if a seat is not provided for you at the table, bring your own folding chair. Right, bring your own chair. And it's about us being in the spaces where we can effect change. At JRF, we have, we work in our outcome areas, and everything we do, whether it's around social security, whether it's around poor housing or around poor work, we try and come up with solutions with people. And one of the things that Linda said is the time that this takes. So on average, a co-designed piece of work for us will take about 18 months, right? And the first part, for me personally, the first part of that process is the relationship and planning. Like it's like building a house. If you don't lay down the foundations, the first storm, the first bit of rough that's going to come along, there goes your house. And I think I loved your analogy, Linda, when you spoke about the tortoise and the hare. This race is definitely a slow and steady rather than Usain Bolt. Yeah, it's a slow and steady, because what we're trying to do, when Charlotte, when you were talking, you just reminded me so much of when I was going through these processes and how empowering that was for me, for people not only ask your opinion, but to value it, to then me to see them as a human being, them talking about some of the struggles that they're dealing with. And when we start meeting on that human to human level, that's what breaks down them and us. That's what breaks down the learned experience or the lived experience or the professional and the non-professional, you know. And it's about it's about, I'm going to say it again, it's about being less risk averse. I think as organizations, they're so worried about what if something goes wrong, or what if they don't get on. If you spend time building relationship, putting in the safety, then you can relax and let the process happen. Sometimes I describe it like having a framework for a picture, and that framework shouldn't be better than the picture. It shouldn't overshadow. What it should do is enhance the picture. It's not just there to hang the picture. It should make the picture shine in all of its beauty. And that to me is what co-production is. When we start the process, sometimes we've got a rough idea of what it could look like or what we imagine, but actually it's that journey, it's that process, and it asks trust in that. I'm going to give a quick example of a bit of work that I was doing that went terribly wrong, but that's where I learned. And I think just allowing yourself to get things wrong is really, really important. So I was working with a group of young people over in Newham, and I didn't know the group very well. And, you know, I picked them up from the street, and over a period of 3 months, we got to know each other. Then we decided that we wanted to do a trip. And not, you know, being young, quite young myself and fairly new into the space, I was like, where do you want to go? And then they said abroad. I thought they wanted to go to the New Forest or something. So I was like, okay, how do we go abroad? And then, long story short, we worked out who had passports and who needed passports and what we'll need. We also had to work out funding. Like, we didn't have any funding at all. And the group, we done a range of fundraising activities, from car boot sales, which was really dangerous because I had to check often with their parents if what they were trying to sell was okay, because they brought some fantastic stuff. We also done an assault course, which raised the most money. So the Army assault course over in Woolwich, people paid money to see these young people get messed up, basically. I mean, that's just crazy. But the more we done these activities, that was the relationship building, that was the trust, and it was so important because we were going to go to a country, we didn't know which country yet, right? We were going to go abroad, that was our broad mission, and we had to look out for each other. Eventually, we settled on Poland because we could get an educational grant. And then we had to say we were an artist group as well. I mean, we were P artists, but there you go. But what was amazing was you had these young people in Poland who were proper artists, and then I had the young people from Newham. And on paper, the two groups wouldn't necessarily mix, but it was so beautiful that at the end of it, the young people, and this is again is about trust and processes, taking risks. They said, actually, we want to host those young people from Poland. And we didn't have any buildings or anything, but they wanted to host them in their homes. And as the project evolved, suddenly the council and everybody else started to get interested and get involved. And this was really important. We allowed them to get involved, but not to take over, because what we had created was magic. What we'd created was trust. What we'd created was understanding. And that's what was working about it, just all on reflection. And I think part of our work is about reflective practice. And that's one of the things I love about the appreciative inquiry is we go into that thing, okay, what went well? What could we do differently? What do we need to change? And the more we can continuously do that, is the better that the work we're doing and the more empowering that it's going to be. And the last closing point is that we have to move away from working with people just so they stay with our organizations. Right. Let me say that again. We have to move away from keeping people dependent on our organizations. You know, if we're talking about progression, they need to progress in life. So that means in our organizations, in a different field, whatever they want to do. And that's what we're aiming for. When we talk about fulfilling lives, we're talking about people being the best that they can be and feeling really comfortable and making choices and taking on something new, you know, studying for some people. I've worked with a young woman who burst into tears because she was the first young woman in her family to go to college, not university, you know. And this is how we have to measure our successes. We have to measure our successes in millimeters. This is so important. How do we amplify voices, empower people to live the life that they deserve? Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Charlotte, for sharing. Now, we're going to go into the activity, which is Dream Big. So just some information about the activity. We're going to be using a Menti board to capture your ideas. We'll keep this blank for a moment while everyone gets logged in. There are two ways you can log into Menti. Either you can go to menti.com and use the code 36535164, or you can click the link which is in the chat. Now, the activity. Now, this is the time where we're going to dream and dream big. This is the time where we're going to share those ideas we have or had before, those ideas that were so transformative, so innovative, so creative that they even scared us ourselves. Often, many of us have shelved those ideas, but today is the day that we're going to share those ideas because we are all among our peers and like-minded and kindred spirit. So feel free to start to share your ideas of what a co-produced future look like.
And also, can I just add, if you have any questions for anyone on the panel, please do pop them into the Q&A and I'll try and pick them up. Thank you, everyone. That was really amazing. So good. I'm so inspired by you all the time. It's just really great to have you all in one place all at the same time. We've had a couple of questions come through already, so I don't know if you want to start with those. So we have a question for Linda. So Linda, do the people with lived experience in the project you were talking about have to commit to not applying to the role themselves? Just wondered if they then get an advantage over other candidates.
Yeah, that's a good question. When it was first decided that we were going to recruit people, they were all given the opportunity to say whether they wanted to apply for the role. And one person in the group did want to apply for the role. So they weren't part of the decision-making process around what the role profile will look like. They got the role profile, obviously, at the end. And they haven't submitted their application form yet, but they said yesterday, they said that they will have it in by the end of this week. And also they're obviously not part of the question making process and everything. So that keeps it a little bit more equal, because other service users in the borough may apply, and and other people who've lived experience who've kind of been in the borough can also apply. So yeah, good question. Thank you.
There's loads of things coming through as well on the Menti board. So people are saying things like allowing people to have control over their own destiny, empowered communities, whole system change, not just co-production on a small level. Best case scenario would be a group of people with diverse lived and learned experiences, all feeling comfortable and like they belong, while sitting at the table together, working towards a common goal.
We also have a change in paradigm, transformational relationships instead of transactional relationships, allowing people to have control over their destiny. I think Katie read that already. It might be a repeat, but a blended workforce. People with lived experience, not just accepting the rules of the game easy with existing committees, but involved in co-setting these rules through co-production.
Does anyone on the panel want to answer the question from their perspective? Tony, Linda, Charlotte?
Yeah, so I done a similar recruitment process with people with lived experience, and the organisation I was working before did use people with lived experience to sit on the staff panel, but I was like, sometimes you have a trustees panel, sometimes you have why can't we have the lived experience panel? And so we went through that whole process of training everybody up so they will design all aspects of it, and that they would also have a chair on their panel as well, and that was really important because of the learning that taught people on the panel, but also because the feedback that we started to get more and more was it felt less like tokenism. People felt that they were really involved and participating to a process. But it's about transparency. If people do want to go for jobs, and one of the things that I've been pushing for a lot is that we need more entry-level jobs, because what happens is people apply for jobs and then they're told they haven't got enough experience or they haven't got the qualifications. So we need jobs across the range, really, because people had lives before they're, you know, and it's about sometimes giving people that step up. So when the panel I worked with and they helped me, they'll come back and say, oh, Tony, I'm applying for this job, what to do? I said, what did you learn from the process you did? And you're like, oh yeah. Like, you've got these skills, you know. Think about those people who answered the questions but didn't answer the question because they already had an answer they wanted to give us, and just be aware of that. So it's about being transparent, it's about being open, it's about allowing people to have as many opportunities as they can. All we have to do is offer it and then support people to take it up.
Yeah, I think definitely, like, I mean, it's coming through in the comments as well, like, definitely, you know, having a blended workforce, or, you know, as you talked about, like having those entry-level positions, but also like ways to transition and develop and grow. Because I think one thing that we've definitely experienced is people will be successful in getting into an entry-level job, but then they just stay there and there's no like development and kind of encouragement to kind of keep pushing and like you know, try and progress within organizations. I think that's definitely something.
That's really true, Kathy. Kathy, wow. Okay, we'll just move on. So at JRF, one of the things we're looking at is our thank you policy. So our thank you policy extends to vouchers and travel, but actually we're looking at how can we progress people. And again, not just within JRF, but, you know, letting people know about seminars like this, letting people know about college courses, letting, you know, and really just going really wide. And I think that's something we as a sector really need to look at. How do we progress people? How do we help people to take those steps to move them on and out of, or to continue that journey of progress?
Can I
Yeah, something into, yeah, of course.
Well, I suppose I'm just thinking, like, makes me think of, like, you know, Inspirit, we kind of, because we came to co-production a bit backwards in a way. So we started because we had lived experience of drug and alcohol use, and then we had a lived experience of being drug and alcohol workers. And what we learned in that process was that many people gained employment in that sector because they happened to be in the right place at the right time. There were people who've lived experience, they became volunteers, and then they just got a job because they were in the organisation. Now, that's great, but some people had no training, no supervision, and they were really just doing whatever they thought they should be doing, but they really weren't competent, not really. And actually, a lot of staff, even who'd been there for a long time, weren't competent. So we actually started training ex-service users for a whole year. We started a diploma in health, it wasn't a diploma, it was NVQ in those days, health and social care. And we trained people who lived experience for a whole year, and we got them a placement, and we got them. And the real focus for us was about reflective practice, because what we saw working in treatment was that staff were defensive, they weren't really willing to look at what they weren't doing well, they were judging, they were blaming service users for not doing and not getting drug free, or, you know, whatever. So really we were just trying to equip people to be able to really notice what they were doing and how. Notice if they were having a good impact, but notice if they weren't, and not be threatened by exploring their own practice. And that really stood people in good stead, not just for working in the drug sector, because many people went on to get jobs. But there's about 200 people in London now who went through our course. And Kate is one of them, and many years ago. But they also went on to do things like, you know, they leveled up. You know, people that we trained went to university after training with us, because, you know, we were people with lived experience. So it was really, we were accessible. They weren't so frightened to go to, you know, some of the people. I remember one of our trustees actually, he said, yeah, I kept being told when I was, you know, sort of, I come out of prison, you know, I'm pretty smart, I should go to college. He said, I walked past that college every day. I couldn't get myself through the door because I didn't feel like I belonged there. But he came to us because he felt like, oh, you know, you're people, you know who I am, you know where I've come from. And but now this man has an MA in Gestalt psychotherapy. And this is someone who left school at 12 and was in and out of prison until he was nearly 40. And just, you know, this is just because it is about helping people feel comfortable, feel safe, and then see themselves, you know, or people like them doing things that is beyond their own wildest dreams. So in a way, the dream about future co-production is about opening people's minds, about having that kind of magic available. Like, actually, the world is accessible to you, but we have to make it accessible to people. I think, anyway, I'll just say that.
So powerful. Yeah. I'm
just going to pick up Sam's question. So Sam put a question in the chat that says, I started off by saying my trip went wrong, but it sounded like it was a success. It was a fantastic success. But just to pick on the point that Linda said, the thing that was wrong about it, and the thing where I was getting a lot of pushback, was because I didn't ask about taking kids abroad. I didn't get permission for all these things. And what had happened was, once that process started, and you know, meeting the parents and getting passports, that's happened. But if I'd asked the council, we'd still be waiting for permission, you know. And we were very, very lucky because one of the girls, her father was a diplomat. So what we worked out was, when we put the diplomatic passport on top, we just sailed through all the time. We just sailed through. There's another question that Linda just picked up on a little bit, around training, right? And that's really important. So Mungos do some really good training. Shelters training is brilliant. Homeless Network does some free training and stuff. But the point that Linda said about people feeling they want to be in an initial environment where they feel safe enough to make mistakes, or, you know, show their vulnerability, that happens, and then they could branch off and go into community colleges, universities, etc. So I'm a big advocate for supporting people to develop in their life, and training, whether it's formal or informal, is so key, because it gives you a bedrock. You know, like so many people, I was doing this out of sheer passion. I started youth work when I was 18, and since then I've had to learn about the different models, the different approaches, the different theories, but that passion was enough, that willingness to love people. And also, somebody's popped in a question about have you worked with people who English isn't their first language? I've changed the question slightly because I can't read and talk. And I have, and it's a challenge. But you know, when COVID hit us, it was a challenge to move from in person to online. We adapt and we overcome. I'm not saying we're Marines, but it's that attitude, it's that thing that, you know, so many of our lives of other people or other forces have been in control. So that ability to swerve, to duck, to bend, that's part and parcel of who we are. So we use that in our work. That, you know, we're sometimes we're told no, we'll find a way. Real quick story. So I was working with this group, and it was mainly Asian young women. And again, I didn't do my due diligence, and I realized that this young woman was on the climbing wall and she was stuck. So I said to another young woman, tell her to come down. And the other little woman looked at me and said, I don't speak her language, I can only understand it. I was like, okay. So what I had to do was climb up beside her and modeled how to climb down, and that's how we done it. You know, English as a barrier is only if we allow it to be. You know, English, not being able to speak English is a barrier. Oh, there's enough things out there that we can use to include people in our workshops, to include people in our trainings, to include people in our in-person activities. And it's for us to be bold. It's for us to take a risk and try it and just go out there and do it. Just to say that people don't speak English as a first language good enough, that's not an excuse, as far as I'm personally concerned, of not to do the work that we're trying to do.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Tony. We've just completely run out of time. The hour has just flown by. I was just wondering, Charlotte, is there anything that you would like to add before we kind of
I'll just say something really quickly, because I've got a question. I was looking at this question: how do we manage blue sky thinking, and then bin sessions, the process is great, 2 years late. I think for me, my experience was that once, I was put in a space where I could hear all the different perspectives, and I could get the whys, and I could understand why something couldn't happen, then it wasn't about, making that thing happen. It was about me understanding why. So I think sometimes it's, there can be small changes along the way as well. And that's a measure of success. It doesn't have to be about the end goal, has to be this amazing service. So I think little things are important as well. But just that understanding, and I think that works two ways, because we kind of learn from each other. So, I'd understand, there's a policy can't be changed, and then that's where co-production should go. I think, people need to be involved at every single level and keep pushing for change. So I hope that made sense. It was all kind of coming out everywhere, but yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Charlotte. I can't believe it's time to wrap up already. I was so nervous about filling the hour, and I just feel like we could just keep going for another hour so easily. I just feel really honoured to be a part of today's webinar and to have you all here. You genuinely are people that I have so much kind of love and respect for. So it's really, really great having you here. So thank you, Charlotte, Linda, Tony. Thank you, Winston, for being my co-facilitator. It's been so much fun and been great listening to you kind of share your wisdom and your ideas. Thank you to George and Jess and Jordan behind the scenes for holding it all together. Really appreciated. And just a massive, massive thank you to everyone who has attended. We are the change makers, we're the radical thinkers, we're the revolutionaries that we need in this world. It's been great to have you all here. We've appreciated your participation, all your wonderful questions and contributions. With all the dreams that you have put into that Menti board, we will collate and do something with and try and share it back to you in some way. So yeah, our next workshop, which is part 2 to this one, is happening on October the 19th, where we'll be focusing on the design and delivery parts of the Appreciative Inquiry model. There'll be more great speakers from the National Expert Citizens Group and Changing Futures team and the Museum of Homelessness. They will be talking about how they have pushed boundaries to make some of their dreams a reality. Everyone that has attended this session by signing up with Eventbrite will automatically receive the Zoom logins for the second workshop. There is still time for others to sign up, so spread the word. We at Fulfilling Lives are in our final year of our 8-year funded programme, and a big part of this phase is about us sharing learning, which we'll do in lots of different ways via reports and shared learning events like this. On Thursday, the 23rd of September, we have an event on the power of language, which you can still sign up for on Eventbrite, and I'm sure Jess will be posting links in the chat. And then we have some other events coming up. We have one around an introduction to informed approaches on the 12th of October, one around the blended workforce, which is something that came up lots and lots in your kind of dreams, what a co-produced future could look like. So yeah, we have a webinar workshop on that on the 21st of October. And then we're doing something to kind of honour Alcohol Awareness Week on the 16th of November. Please keep your eye on our Twitter and our events pages at Fulfilling Lives lsl.london/events. And there will be links to all those events there and lots of other things that are happening over 2022. Also, our website has loads of resources, reports and info and links to our national evaluators as well. So please look out for those. Jess, like I said, is dropping everything. I can see it all binging up in the chat. And finally, if you could support us by completing the online feedback form, which is also in the chat. It should only take about 5 minutes or 10 if you're really thorough. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. So a final massive thank you to our panelists. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you everyone that's turned up today, and we will see you next time. Bye.